A single curved stone can hold up a mountain. This is the hidden power of the arch, the fundamental building block of empires. By the end of this journey, you will see every ancient monument not as a ruin, but as a dramatic story of physics and ambition carved in stone. We will uncover how rulers used these structures to project an image of unshakable power, and we will reveal the simple scientific secret that allowed them to build spaces that seemed to defy gravity itself. How did a basic understanding of weight and thrust become the ultimate tool for controlling an empire's destiny? And what desperate innovations did they use to prevent their greatest ceilings from collapsing? When you look at a soaring dome or a grand archway, what do you believe its builders were truly trying to tell the world? That first, instinctual understanding of the arch began not on a drawing board, but under the open sky. For our earliest ancestors, a natural stone bridge was more than a geological curiosity. It was a sanctuary and a strategic passage. It offered shelter from the rain and a safe route across a chasm. Crucially, it stood for centuries, a silent testament to the incredible durability of the curved shape. This was nature's blueprint, a free lesson in structural integrity, and someone, somewhere, finally decided to take notes. The first human attempts to copy this design were not graceful, soaring curves, but something far more rugged. Look at the massive tombs of the Mycenaeans, built with a technique we call corbelling. They would lay flat stones, each layer jutting slightly inward over the one below, like a stack of books slowly leaning toward the center. It was a painstaking process, a cautious, step-by-step climb to enclose a space. Yet within that crude stacking lay a genius revelation. These builders were instinctively managing the force of gravity. They were channeling the immense weight of the earth above down through the stones, and just as importantly, pushing it outwards to the sides. This outward push, this thrust, was the secret they had observed in the natural arch. They learned that stability came from balancing this lateral force, from ensuring their walls were strong enough to contain the arch's desire to spread apart. This marked the profound shift from simply copying a shape to grasping the physics behind it. That nascent understanding of compression and stability, born in the darkness of a primitive tomb, was the seed. It was the foundational principle that ambitious rulers would later use to build their legends in stone. That primitive understanding of thrust and counterbalance was about to be engineered on an imperial scale. In the shadow of a rising aqueduct, the arch ceased to be a singular achievement and became a repeatable component, a standardized part in the machine of empire. The Romans took the arch and industrialized its creation. Their genius was not in the curve itself, but in the systems they built around it. They employed wooden formwork, temporary frames that could be reused again and again, allowing teams of workers to replicate the perfect semicircular arch with incredible speed and precision. And then there was their concrete, a revolutionary mix that could even set underwater, creating a monolithic strength that earlier stone-on-stone constructions could never match. This was the true breakthrough, transforming ambitious designs into permanent, colossal realities. The physics, however, remained the same, just magnified 1,000-fold. Every stone in a Roman arch was in compression, its weight channeled downward and transformed into a powerful outward thrust. The Romans brilliantly solved this by never letting an arch stand alone. In an aqueduct, each arch buttressed the next, creating a continuous chain of mutual support. In the Colosseum, 80 arched entrances on 3 successive levels all leaned on one another, a colossal stone web where every element helped contain the thrust of its neighbors. This is what allowed those staggering structures to soar, to carry the weight of a mountain of water across a valley or the roar of 50,000 spectators. The rounded arch became the ultimate symbol of Roman order. It was efficient, predictable, and unshakably strong, a physical manifestation of the empire's control over the natural world. As Roman legions marched, this architectural form traveled with them, stamping the landscape with a recognizable signature of power. But this mastery of the rounded arch, for all its grandeur, was ultimately a two-dimensional strength. It created tunnels and bridges, but the ultimate dream, enclosing a vast, open space without a single internal support, required a third dimension. The race to conquer the ceiling was just beginning. Every stone in that soaring vault is locked in a silent, permanent struggle. The immense weight from above bears down, but the clever shape of the wedge-shaped stones, the voussoirs, transforms that downward force. They press inward against each other, channeling the load safely along the curve and down to the ground. This state of constant squeezing, known as compression, is the very source of the arch's strength. But this strength comes with a powerful and dangerous side effect, a lateral thrust that pushes outward at the arch's base with relentless force. The entire structure yearns to sprawl apart. The ancient builders' greatest challenge was not holding the arch up, but holding it in. They learned through generations of trial and error that to contain this thrust, they needed massive supporting walls or external buttresses, shoulders of stone that could push back and keep the arch from collapsing under its own ambition. This empirical grasp of physics, this hard-won knowledge of compression and thrust, was their most valuable tool. It allowed them to create spans that appeared to defy logic, sheltering vast congregations without a single internal pillar. Stepping into such a space was a profound psychological experience. The sheer openness overhead, the feeling that the ceiling was floating, humbled any visitor and directed their gaze and their awe upward, toward the gods or the emperor who commanded such a feat. To master these physical laws was to command the very forces of nature, a definitive display of imperial will. And with this foundational knowledge firmly in hand, the stage was set for the ultimate architectural ambition, to take this curved line and spin it into a dome. The true power of the vault reveals itself in the silent, overwhelming space of the Roman Pantheon. There, your gaze is drawn upward into a perfect hemisphere of coffered concrete, a ceiling that seems to float without any visible means of support. This is the arch spun into its ultimate three-dimensional form, a structure that does not merely span a distance but captures an entire volume of air and light. The journey to this masterpiece began with the humble barrel vault, a simple extension of the arch that created long, tunnel-like corridors in basilicas and bathhouses. Yet this initial solution had a critical weakness. Its continuous curve exerted thrust along its entire length, requiring massive, windowless walls to contain the pressure and leaving the interiors dark and heavy. The breakthrough came with the Groin vault, a brilliant intersection of two barrel vaults. This crossing concentrated the forces of weight and thrust onto just 4 corner points. Suddenly, the massive supporting walls were no longer necessary. The spaces between those points could be opened up, filled with windows that flooded the interior with light. Dark, confined rooms were transformed into luminous, expansive halls where citizens could gather, trade, and worship under a ceiling that felt both impossibly high and miraculously open. This was more than an architectural upgrade. It was a psychological conquest. By physically capturing and defining such vast interior space, the vault became the ultimate expression of imperial ambition, a declaration that human will could now shape the very sky above a city. But this soaring ambition could not be realized with stone alone. It demanded a new kind of material, one that could be poured into any shape and would harden into a mountain. That pourable stone, Roman concrete, was the empire's ultimate physical advantage. While earlier civilizations relied on perfectly carved blocks, the Romans developed a recipe that could be mixed and poured into any shape, a liquid mountain waiting to be born. The secret ingredient was a fine volcanic ash from Pozzuoli. When this ash was mixed with lime and rubble, it triggered a chemical reaction that created an exceptionally strong and durable binder. This was not just a different kind of mortar, it was a technological leap. Its most miraculous property was its ability to cure and harden even when completely submerged in water, a feat modern concrete struggles to replicate. This single characteristic allowed Roman engineers to build harbors, breakwaters, and bridge foundations directly in the sea, projecting their power across the Mediterranean from the very shoreline. But its impact on land was even more transformative. The complex, soaring curves of vaults and domes, which would have required generations of master stonemasons to carve, could now be formed by pouring this liquid stone into reusable wooden molds. This process dramatically reduced the need for highly specialized labor. An army of workers could now assemble the formwork, mix the concrete, and in a matter of days, create a structural shell of incredible strength. The widespread availability of its components, lime and volcanic ash, meant this revolutionary building technique was not confined to the capital. From the damp frontiers of Britain to the arid deserts of Syria, the same concrete recipe allowed the rapid construction of aqueducts, bathhouses, and basilicas. This created a unified architectural language stamped across 3 continents, a constant physical reminder of Roman authority. Concrete was more than a building material. It was the physical embodiment of Roman logistical genius. With this malleable tool of domination in their hands, architects were finally free to design for the heavens. That pourable stone made the dome possible, but it was the dome itself that conquered the sky. Inside the Hagia Sophia, the golden light from 40 windows seems to sever the central dome from the walls below, leaving it to hover like a second sun suspended in the air. This was the vault's final evolution, a structure designed not just to enclose space, but to gather it, to pull every gaze and every prayer upward toward the shimmering representation of heaven. To achieve this miracle of weightlessness, Byzantine engineers faced a problem their Roman predecessors never fully solved: the relentless circular tension, or hoop stress, that constantly tries to burst a dome apart at its base. Their ingenious answer was a masterclass in structural deception. They built the dome not on a round wall, but on a square one, using curved triangular segments called pendentives to make the seamless transition from the 4 corners below to the perfect circle above. These pendentives acted like 4 hidden arches, channeling the dome's crushing weight down into the 4 massive pillars at the building's corners. Then they buttressed the main dome with smaller half-domes, which in turn were supported by even smaller semi-domes, creating a cascading series of supports that dissipated the destructive outward thrust. The result was an interior that felt both vast and miraculously unburdened. For a worshipper, this created an overwhelming sensory experience, a feeling of being lifted from the earthly realm into the divine. And for an emperor, this was the ultimate stage. To be crowned directly beneath the center of that dome was a profound symbolic act, a declaration that he stood at the very axis of the world, his authority sanctioned by God and made visible by the impossible architecture surrounding him. The dome became the supreme architectural metaphor, a perfect fusion of spiritual aspiration and absolute earthly power. But a metaphor, no matter how powerful, is useless if the people cannot read it. You did not need to read the laws carved on a public tablet to understand the power of Rome. The city itself was the text, and its grammar was written in stone. As a traveler approached, their first sight was often the skeletal arcades of an aqueduct striding across the plain. This was not merely a utility, it was a calculated demonstration. The relentless, identical rhythm of its arches spoke of a system, of a standardized, repeatable order that could be imposed upon any landscape, no matter how wild. It told you that this state could command water itself to flow where it willed, bringing life to the city and leaving the countryside in its shadow. It was a promise of public benefit that was also a quiet threat, a display of logistical reach that no local chieftain could ever hope to match. Moving into the city, the scale shifted from the systematic to the sublime. Entering a vast bath complex like the Baths of Caracalla, you were dwarfed by soaring vaults that captured acres of open space. The message was no longer just about order, but about abundance. The sheer volume of stone, the staggering expense of labor and material, proclaimed that this empire possessed resources so vast they could be literally given away to the public. This was munificence on an intimidating scale, a benevolence that demanded gratitude and reinforced social hierarchy. You were welcome to enjoy these gifts, but you could never forget who provided them. This architectural language was universal. From the repetitive arches of a Roman aqueduct to the intimidating gateways of Assyrian palaces, the forms changed, but the message was constant. Grand scale demonstrated inexhaustible resources. Imposing permanence in stone suggested a political order that was equally eternal. And the sheer, awe-inspiring beauty of a space like the Hagia Sophia communicated a divine sanction for the ruler beneath its dome. Every curve and every column was a silent, powerful voice, conditioning the psychology of the subject to accept a fundamental truth, that this power was unshakable, benevolent, and destined to last forever. Far to the east of Rome, another empire was writing its own declaration in the sky. In the audience hall of the Sasanian palace at Ctesiphon, the tact casra still stands, its colossal brick arch framing the empty throne room of a long-vanished king. This is the largest single-span brick vault ever constructed, a staggering parabola of baked brick that soars over 100 feet high without any internal support. Its scale alone was a statement of raw power, but the Persian genius lay in the details. While Roman engineers relied on their revolutionary concrete, Persian architects perfected the use of baked brick and a strong gypsum mortar, allowing them to build thinner, lighter, and more daringly curved structures. They pioneered the pointed arch, a shape that channels weight more efficiently downward, reducing the destructive lateral thrust that so concerned their Roman counterparts. This was not merely a different aesthetic, it was a distinct and sophisticated engineering solution to the same universal problem of thrust and compression. Inside their palaces and mosques, this mastery reached its zenith with the invention of the muqarnas. These stunning, honeycomb-like decorations of miniature vaults appear to cascade down the walls and ceilings, dissolving the solid stone into a shimmering cascade of geometric light and shadow. The ceiling no longer felt like a heavy, physical barrier, but like a celestial canopy or a frozen waterfall, lifting the gaze and the spirit upward. This served the same core imperial function as the Roman vault, to create an awe-inspiring stage for royal ceremony and to project an image of cosmic authority. Yet the story of the vault was never one of isolated genius. Caravans traveling the Silk Road did not just carry silks and spices, they carried ideas. The pointed arch, refined in Persia, would travel westward to become a foundational element of Gothic cathedrals, allowing them to reach even more dizzying heights. The intricate logic of the muqarnas would spread across the Islamic world, from Spain to India. This was a cross-continental dialogue in stone and brick, a silent conversation between empires that propelled architectural evolution forward for centuries. The Persian tradition proves that the ambition to master space and physics was a universal human drive, one that each culture answered with its own unique voice, materials, and genius. The Gothic cathedral is a cage of light built from a skeleton of stone. To stand in the nave of Notre Dame is to witness a perfect union of structure and spirit, where the very walls seem to dissolve into a kaleidoscope of holy narrative. The key to this miracle was a subtle but profound shift in geometry. The rounded Roman arch, for all its strength, pushes outward with significant force, demanding thick, heavy walls to contain it. The pointed arch, a shape likely refined through contact with Eastern builders, behaves differently. It channels the immense weight of the roof more directly downward, drastically reducing the destructive lateral thrust. This single innovation allowed walls to be built taller and, crucially, thinner, but the masons did not stop there. They externalized the problem of thrust altogether with the flying buttress. These elegant, arched stone ribs leap from the outer walls to massive external piers, acting as a permanent exoskeleton. They catch the thrust from the high vaults and redirect it, channeling it safely away from the building and down into the earth. This brilliant system transformed the cathedral's walls from load-bearing necessities into mere screens, and a screen exists to be filled. Freed from their structural duties, those walls could now be pierced by vast, intricate stained glass windows. The interior was no longer illuminated by simple sunlight, but by a fractured, heavenly glow of ruby red, sapphire blue, and emerald green. This was the physics of empire applied to the kingdom of God. The soaring vertical lines of the piers and arches pulled every eye and every prayer upward, while the luminous walls told the stories of Scripture in a language of light that even the illiterate could understand. A Gothic cathedral was more than a building. It was a community's collective ambition made stone, a vaulting of faith toward the heavens. This breathtaking reach for the divine, however, would eventually ground itself in a renewed appreciation for the earth-bound logic of the ancients. Florence's cathedral stood for over a century with a gaping hole in its roof, a public challenge that taunted the city's greatest minds. How do you cap the largest octagonal crossing in Christendom with a dome no one knew how to build? The solution arrived not from a guild of masons, but from a single man, Filippo Brunelleschi, who had quietly unlocked the secrets of Rome. The Renaissance was dawning, and with it came a fervent desire to reclaim the lost engineering genius of the ancients. Brunelleschi did not merely copy the Roman Pantheon, he reverse-engineered it. He saw that the Romans used concrete, a material he no longer possessed in quantity. So he devised something entirely new, a double shell. By building two thinner, lighter domes, one nested inside the other, he created a structure that was far stronger and more stable than a single massive one. He connected them with horizontal stone and iron chains, like barrels hooped together, to resist the dome's inherent desire to burst outward, and then he engineered the construction process itself. His brilliant herringbone pattern of laying bricks, spiraling upward in a self-supporting spiral, meant the dome could be built without the immense and costly wooden centering, the temporary support structure that traditional arches required. This was not just building, it was a calculated act of structural genius. Brunelleschi had fused empirical observation with rigorous mathematics. He understood the physics of compression and thrust not as a mystery, but as a set of calculable forces to be managed and outwitted. In doing so, he elevated the architect from a master craftsman to a visionary intellectual. The perfect curve of his dome was celebrated as more than a roof. It was a manifestation of divine geometry, a reflection of the harmonic order believed to govern the universe. This reconnection of architectural form to humanist ambition transformed stone and mortar into a statement about human potential. The quiet, balanced perfection of the Renaissance dome, however, was merely the prelude. The stage was now set for architecture to break its classical restraints and become something fluid, dramatic, and overwhelmingly emotional. Borromini's spiraling dome does not simply enclose space, it churns it. Where the Renaissance sought perfect harmony, the Baroque unleashed a calculated chaos, turning stone into a whirlwind of motion and light. In churches like Sant'Ivo alla Sapienza, the stable geometry of the dome gives way to a complex star shape that seems to rotate as you gaze upward, an architectural illusion that defies the very stillness of the material. This was a fundamental shift. Vaults were no longer just structural achievements, they became dynamic instruments of emotion. Architects mastered the art of interpenetration, weaving multiple vaults together so that walls and ceilings appeared to undulate, blurring the line between solid mass and empty void. The physics of thrust and compression were now servants to a grander goal, sensory overload. Above these restless forms, painters took the deception even further. Vast frescoes on concave ceilings created the illusion that the roof had vanished, opening a vision of heaven where clouds billowed and figures tumbled dramatically into the space of the church. This was architecture as total theater, a deliberate assault on rational perception. The purpose was unequivocal: to overwhelm the faithful, to stir awe and devotion so profound it left no room for doubt. In an age of religious schism and absolutist rule, such spectacle was a powerful political tool. The swirling energy of a Baroque vault was a declaration that the authority of the church and the monarch was not just stable and eternal, but actively dynamic, all-encompassing, and divinely animated. It was the physics of empire refined into pure emotional manipulation. Yet, this breathtaking flight into illusion could not last forever. The same human intellect that learned to build these dizzying wonders would soon turn a more critical, measuring eye upon them, demanding that form follow not faith, but fact. A hanging chain holds the secret to a dome's stability. During the Age of Enlightenment, thinkers like Giovanni Polni looked at the massive dome of St. Peter's and saw not just a miracle of faith, but a complex physics problem waiting to be solved. He famously inverted the problem, suspending a heavy chain between 2 points. The natural curve it formed, called a catenary, was a perfect mirror image of the ideal line of thrust for an arch. This simple, elegant model translated the intuition of master masons into a predictable, calculable force. The arch was no longer a mystical shape passed down through generations. It was a system of forces that could be drawn on a page. Engineers developed graphical methods to map these lines of thrust through a structure, identifying precisely where the compressive forces traveled and, crucially, where the masonry might crack if that line strayed outside the wall. This was the birth of structural engineering as a formal science. The design of vaults shifted decisively from an artisanal tradition, reliant on rules of thumb and inherited knowledge, to a scientifically grounded practice of calculation and prediction. The immediate architectural expression of this new rigor was often one of restraint, a neoclassical return to orderly, rational forms, but this was the quiet before the storm. By systematically removing the mystery from the arch, these pioneers unlocked a power for planning and ambition that their predecessors could never have conceived. The stage was now set for this new scientific understanding to be applied not to stone, but to materials that the ancient world could never have imagined. The Victorian world was reshaped by a material born of fire and force. In 1851, London's Hyde Park became the site of a revelation, the Crystal Palace. This was not a building of stone and mortar, but a breathtaking expanse of light and air, a cathedral of industry built from countless slender iron arches and over 900,000 square feet of glass. The ancient principles of the vault were still there, the channeling of weight along a curve, the careful management of thrust, but the material had changed everything. Cast and wrought iron possessed a strength that stone could never match, especially against the pulling force of tension. This allowed the arch to shed its massive bulk. The heavy, compressive mass of a Roman aqueduct was replaced by a delicate, repetitive lattice, a structure so light it seemed to be made of lace. These new metal arches created vast, unobstructed volumes under the soaring train sheds of great railway stations and within the bustling market halls of growing cities. The function was purely practical, to shelter crowds and machinery without the obstruction of columns. Yet the effect was utterly spectacular. This was the physics of a new empire, an empire of commerce, global trade, and rapid transit, expressed through a form as old as civilization itself. The ambition to command space now reached a scale that would have dwarfed the Pantheon. For the first time in history, the structure and the skin of a building could become two separate things. The arch was no longer a solid wall that you passed through. It was a fragile-seeming frame that held up the sky itself, a sky you could see right through. The sweeping concrete shell of Felix Candela's Los Manantials restaurant appears to float on the edge of a Mexican lake, its surface impossibly thin, its curves impossibly complex. This was the arch reborn through mathematics, a hyperbolic paraboloid that used geometric purity to achieve a strength and lightness the Romans could never have calculated. Modernism, with its famous rejection of historical ornament, might seem to have turned its back on the past, yet it became obsessed with the arch's fundamental truth, its perfect marriage of form and structural function. The new material was reinforced concrete, a modern echo of Rome's pourable stone but immeasurably stronger, with steel bars embedded inside to resist the tensile forces that would crack ordinary stone. This allowed engineers to sculpt forms that were once unimaginable, thin shell vaults that behaved like the curved surface of an egg, incredibly strong because of their shape rather than their mass. The arch was purified, stripped of its imperial carvings and religious frescoes, and celebrated for its naked engineering logic. It became a symbol not of a king or a god, but of a new faith in human progress and technological optimism. Eero Saarinen's Gateway Arch in St. Louis is the ultimate statement of this ideal, a catenary curve of stainless steel stretching 630 feet into the sky. It is a monument not to a person, but to the spirit of expansion and movement, its form derived purely from the mathematical line of thrust. The physics that once upheld empires was now democratized, becoming the language of corporate identity in airport terminals, the grand gesture of a university library, and the efficient span of a public gymnasium. The ambition to master space through the curve had not vanished. It had simply found a new patron in the modern world. The curve of an arch still frames the gateways to modern power. In capitals like Pyongyang, triumphal arches of staggering scale deliberately echo the imperial language of Rome, their silhouettes a conscious invocation of ancient authority for contemporary regimes. Yet this same architectural form soars over the departure halls of international airports, where vast, vaulted ceilings of steel and glass create luminous, fluid spaces for a global citizenry on the move. The materials are new, but the psychological effect is timeless. These are our modern basilicas, spaces designed to manage immense crowds while instilling a sense of occasion, of transition, of being part of something larger than oneself. The physics that governs these structures is no longer the domain of intuitive master masons, but of complex computer models that simulate every conceivable stress and load. This digital foresight allows for breathtaking audacity, like the retractable arched roofs of modern sports stadiums, which combine the ancient imperative to shelter a multitude with a technological capability to peel back the sky itself. These are not merely buildings, they are the direct descendants of the Roman aqueduct and the Persian iwan, proving that this fundamental solution to enclosing space is as relevant in the 21st century as it was 2,000 years ago. The language of civic importance and collective human experience is still, in part, written in the enduring curve of an arch. That shimmering vision of heaven in the Hagia Sophia, that perfect curve of Brunelleschi's dome, was not conjured from thin air. It was carved, hauled, and mortared into existence by an army of the unseen. For every emperor who dreamed in stone, there were thousands whose lives were consumed by the reality of it. The true physics of empire was a brutal equation of human force. Consider the scale of the logistics alone. To build a single Roman aqueduct required quarrying millions of tons of stone, transporting them across impossible distances, and mixing enough mortar to bind a mountain. The labor force was a massive, complex machine. At its base were the slaves, captives from Rome's endless wars, who provided the raw muscle for the most dangerous tasks in the quarries and on the construction site. They were the anonymous engines of ambition, but they were not alone. They were directed by skilled artisans, stonemasons who could precisely carve a voussoir, and carpenters who built the intricate wooden formwork. Overseeing it all were the military engineers, applying the legion's discipline to the chaos of a building site. This entire undertaking was funded by a system of heavy taxation and the vast wealth extracted from conquered provinces. The very materials were often trophies of war, the marble and granite ripped from the lands of vanquished kings. So when you stand in the shadow of a great arch, you are not just looking at a triumph of engineering. You are witnessing the culmination of an entire economic and social system, one built on conquest, coercion, and immense human suffering. The soaring space inside a cathedral vault is also a monument to the generations of laborers who never saw its completion, who worked in the dust and the danger for a vision that was never their own. This legacy directly challenges us today. How do we preserve these magnificent structures while also honoring the full, difficult truth of their creation? The arch endures, but so does its shadow, a permanent reminder of the human price paid for every meter of imperial sky. We can now walk through a ruin as its first citizens did. A three-dimensional digital reconstruction of the Basilica of Maxentius restores its cavernous space. The coffered vaults, once sheathed in polished marble and gleaming gold leaf, now stretching above you in their original, intimidating scale. This is not an artist's impression. It is a scientific resurrection built from millions of data points. Technologies like laser scanning and photogrammetry capture every crack and contour of a surviving structure with millimeter precision, creating a perfect digital twin. This virtual model becomes a laboratory for the past. Engineers can run simulations, applying digital forces to see how the vaults would have handled the immense dead load of their own weight, or how they might have swayed and cracked during a long-forgotten earthquake. We can test the precise sequence of construction, virtually removing the wooden centering to watch the arch become self-supporting for the first time in over a millennium. This process answers questions that textbooks cannot. Was the mortar in this section fully cured before the next level was added? How did light from the original window openings fall across the floor, guiding the movement of the crowd? Digital archaeology allows us to experience the psychological impact of these spaces as they were intended, not as broken skeletons. For conservators, this is a revolutionary tool. By comparing new scans with the digital baseline, they can detect the subtlest shifts in the masonry, monitoring decay and planning interventions with a surgeon's precision. This new way of seeing deepens our respect for the ancient master builders, revealing the empirical genius behind every curve. But the value of this digital lens is not confined to preservation. The same algorithms that analyze the flow of forces through a Roman vault are now used to design the lightweight, efficient shells of tomorrow's buildings, creating a direct and living lineage from the physics of empire to the architecture of our future. A living building now breathes in a laboratory. Its ceiling is not built but grown, a lattice of biopolymers woven into a vault that monitors its own stresses and strains. This is the next great leap, where the physics of the arch merges with the intelligence of biology. The guiding principle is biomimicry, the art of learning from structures perfected by evolution over millions of years. Consider the humble seashell. Its curved form a masterpiece of strength and efficiency, able to withstand immense ocean pressures, or the spider web, a delicate tracery of silk that can stop a speeding insect without breaking. Our own bones are a perfect example, a porous, lightweight structure that is incredibly resilient. These are the new blueprints. Instead of piling stone upon stone, we are now programming materials to grow into these optimal forms, creating vaults that are not just strong, but alive with data. The tool making this possible is computational design. Architects no longer merely draw a curve, they define a set of environmental and structural parameters, and the computer generates thousands of potential forms, evolving them until it finds the perfect, most efficient shape. This digital DNA is then sent to a three-dimensional printer, which builds the vault layer by layer, creating intricate, bone-like geometries that were simply impossible to carve from stone or cast in concrete. The material itself is becoming intelligent. We are developing composites embedded with networks of microsensors, a nervous system for a building. These smart materials can detect the faintest hairline crack and release a healing agent to seal it, just as our skin repairs a small cut. They can sense shifting loads from wind or snow and subtly change their shape to redistribute the forces, a constant, real-time dance of self-stabilization. The ancient struggle between compression and thrust is now managed not by massive buttresses, but by a quiet, continuous conversation between the structure and its environment. This ongoing evolution of the vault, from quarried stone to printed polymer, proves one thing with absolute clarity. The curve that once declared the power of an emperor is a fundamental, enduring language. It will continue to shape the spaces of our future, whether they house servers, sustainable communities, or new collective dreams. The Pantheon's dome is not merely a roof, it is a captured piece of the sky. Step inside, and your entire perception of space is reordered by a single, perfect geometrical idea, a sphere perfectly inscribed within a cylinder. This is the vault's ambition realized in its most philosophical form. The massive rotunda represents the solid, earthly world, while the soaring hemisphere of the dome embodies the heavens, and at the very center of this cosmic model, the oculus, a 30-foot-wide opening, stares directly into the firmament. This open eye is the architectural masterstroke. It allows a shifting beam of sunlight to travel across the coffered interior, marking the hours and the seasons like a celestial clock. Rain sometimes falls through it, and the floor is subtly sloped to drain the water away, a humble, practical concession to the elements within this otherwise divine space. The building itself becomes a living instrument, connecting everyone inside to the rhythms of the cosmos. This was the ultimate symbolic statement of imperial power. The Roman emperor, who would have presided over ceremonies here, positioned himself as the pivotal figure at the center of this universe, the essential link between the round, mortal world below and the perfect, eternal heavens above. But this breathtaking metaphor would have collapsed into rubble without an equally brilliant application of material science. the Romans engineered the very fabric of the dome to make this vision possible. As the concrete was poured, the builders mixed the recipe with strategic genius. The heavy, robust aggregate at the base, a mix of travertine and tuff, gradually gave way to lighter materials like pumice and volcanic scoria at the top. They were literally making the dome lighter as it rose, reducing the crushing weight borne by the lower walls and minimizing the destructive outward thrust. This was a profound understanding of load management, a calculated lightening of the structural burden. The intricate coffering, those recessed square panels covering the interior surface, served a dual purpose. While their mesmerizing geometric pattern draws the eye irresistibly upward, enhancing the feeling of sublime grandeur, they were also a crucial weight-saving measure. Each coffer carved away non-essential mass without sacrificing an ounce of structural integrity, like sculpting a bone to be both strong and light. The Pantheon, therefore, stands as a perfect union of three powerful forces: a revolutionary vaulting technique, a masterful command of concrete, and a cosmic political ideology, all fused into one enduring form. Its silent, majestic presence has challenged architects for nearly 2 millennia, a permanent benchmark for how to build a universe under a single roof. The Hagia Sophia's dome was a calculated defiance of reality. Its architects, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidorus of Miletus, were not merely builders, they were geometricians and physicists tasked with a seemingly impossible puzzle. How do you seat a perfect circular dome upon a solid square base? Their brilliant, pioneering solution was the pendentive. Picture 4 massive, curved triangular segments rising from each corner of the building's square core. These pendentives acted as transitional arches, gracefully bridging the gap between the straight lines below and the perfect circle above. They channeled the dome's colossal weight down into 4 mighty pillars at the corners, effectively focusing the load and freeing the walls between them to be filled with cascading arches and windows. This was the structural genius that made the vast, open interior possible. Yet, the first version of this ambition ended in catastrophe. The original, shallower dome proved too ambitious for its supports. The immense outward thrust was too great, and in 558, just 2 decades after its completion, the dome cracked and collapsed during an earthquake. This failure was a brutal but vital lesson in the unyielding laws of physics. The rebuild was an act of humble engineering intelligence. Isidorus the Younger, a nephew of the original architect, supervised the reconstruction. He designed a new dome that was significantly taller, a steeper curve that channeled more of its weight downward rather than outward. More crucially, he reinforced the building with massive external buttresses, visible today as great stone shoulders bracing the structure. These buttresses were the essential counterforce, actively pushing back against the dome's desire to sprawl, finally achieving the stability its creators had first envisioned. Inside, the completed space was designed to erase all sense of this earthly struggle. A ring of 40 windows was pierced directly at the base of the main dome, creating a brilliant band of light that visually slices the dome from the supports below. This golden halo makes the vast mosaic ceiling appear to hover, detached from any physical architecture, shimmering like a second sky. This was the ultimate illusion, a space where architecture transcended stone and mortar to become a metaphor for heaven itself. For nearly a millennium, it stood as the largest enclosed space in the world, a definitive symbol of Byzantine imperial power and divine favor. Its form would go on to inspire generations, echoing in the great mosques of the Ottoman Empire and the cathedrals of the West. The Hagia Sophia stands as a testament to a breathtaking truth, that our most sublime architectural achievements are often born from the ashes of failure, a perfect balance of human ambition and hard-won physical law. Granite arches stride directly through the heart of a Spanish city. The Aqueduct of Segovia is not a ruin on a distant hilltop. It is the living spine of the urban center, its two tiers of unmortared stone blocks forming a permanent part of the daily landscape. This was imperial messaging at its most potent. While a temple might be visited on a holy day and a palace seen only by the elite, every citizen of Segovia lived and worked in the shadow of this structure. They fetched water from its fountains, their children played near its massive piers, and its silhouette was the backdrop to their entire lives. The aqueduct's message was inescapable and repeated 166 times in its towering arches. Rome is here and Rome provides. The engineering itself was a silent sermon on Roman superiority. Built entirely of precisely cut granite blocks held together by nothing but friction and the perfect balance of compressive forces, it was a masterpiece of refined simplicity. Each wedge-shaped stone, each voussoir, was carved to such exacting tolerances that the weight of the water channel above is channeled flawlessly down the curve and into the ground, a kinetic sculpture of managed force that has stood for 2,000 years. There is no mortar to crack or decay, only the enduring intelligence of the rounded arch. This was infrastructure as a direct extension of imperial will. By bringing a reliable water supply to a provincial city, Rome was not just quenching thirst, it was enabling public baths, sanitation, and urban growth. It was delivering the very substance of civilization itself. But this gift was also a demonstration of overwhelming logistical power. The aqueduct proclaimed that the empire could commandeer local quarries, organize vast labor forces, and reshape the very terrain to serve its needs. Its monumental presence, striding across a city plaza, transformed a utilitarian project into a permanent memorial to the system that built it. Long after the last legion departed and the imperial administration crumbled into dust, the aqueduct kept functioning. Its continued service for centuries after the fall of Rome is the ultimate testament to the soundness of its underlying physics, a final, powerful lesson from the empire that understood how to build not just for its own time but for the ages. A collapsed arch is a story frozen in mid-sentence. An archaeologist kneeling in the dust does not see a random pile of rubble, but a crime scene where the suspect is physics itself. Their first task is to carefully map the debris field, the final resting place of each wedge-shaped voussoir. The precise scatter pattern of these stones tells a vivid tale. If the stones have fallen inward, the failure likely began at the keystone, perhaps from a direct impact or a critical flaw in that central block. If the stones are splayed outward, pushed away from the center, the culprit was almost certainly uncontrolled lateral thrust, the arch's inherent desire to sprawl finally overcoming its buttresses. A clean, symmetrical collapse might point to a single catastrophic event like an earthquake, while a slumping, uneven ruin suggests a slower, more insidious enemy, the gradual settlement of an inadequate foundation. This is forensic engineering on a centuries-long timescale, but the clues go far beyond the stone's positions. The archaeologist takes a small sample of the ancient mortar, a material that holds chemical secrets. Its composition, the specific mix of lime, sand, and even crushed pottery or volcanic ash, acts like a fingerprint. It can reveal the technological knowledge of the builders and trace the materials back to their source quarries, mapping out forgotten trade routes that supplied the empire's construction sites. Even the stones themselves speak. The chisel marks on a voussoir are the unique signature of the mason who carved it. By analyzing these tool marks and the pattern of the construction joints, we can deduce the sequence of the work. Did they build the arch in segments, working from both sides toward the center? Was the workforce organized into specialized teams, each responsible for a different part of the vault? This meticulous reverse engineering allows us to reconstruct not just the building, but the very process of its creation, the daily rhythm of the labor force, and the problem-solving logic of the master builder. Each fragment of carved stone is a piece of a grand puzzle, transforming meaningless rubble back into a coherent narrative of human ambition, technical ingenuity, and sometimes fatal miscalculation. Yet, uncovering this story presents its own profound dilemma. Once we have pieced together the cause of a vault's collapse, how do we decide whether to let it rest in its fallen state, a testament to time and entropy, or to intervene and resurrect its original form, an act that risks erasing the very history we seek to understand? That steel tie rod drilled through the Colosseum's ancient masonry is a quiet confession. We can no longer maintain these structures through their original logic alone. We must intervene to keep them standing. This act of preservation forces a profound ethical question upon us. Do we stabilize a ruin as we find it, allowing the graceful decay that tells a story of time's passage? Do we restore it to a specific moment in its past, an act of historical interpretation that is never neutral? Or do we rebuild it completely, giving it new life for modern use but potentially erasing the very patina of age that makes it meaningful? Each choice carries a different consequence for the story the monument tells. Inserting a steel tie to counteract the very thrust the Roman builders managed with mass and geometry is a practical solution, but it fundamentally alters the building's material integrity. We are fixing a problem with a foreign element, prioritizing survival over pure authenticity. This dilemma becomes even more charged with a structure like the Hagia Sophia. Its walls are a layered text of human belief, bearing Christian mosaics and Islamic calligraphy. To restore it solely as a Byzantine cathedral or purely as an Ottoman mosque is to make a political statement, to choose one chapter of its life and silence the others. There is a poignant, undeniable beauty in a ruin. The gaping roof of an abbey open to the sky, the tree growing through a fractured vault. These are not signs of failure but of a different kind of narrative. They speak eloquently of impermanence, of the fall of empires and the relentless reclaiming power of nature. An overly zealous restoration that makes an ancient building look brand new can sterilize it, stripping away this powerful elegy written in stone. Modern conservation seeks a delicate balance. The goal is to be a careful custodian, not a creative author. It aims to prolong the structure's life while making any intervention reversible and visually distinguishable, respecting the building as a palimpsest, a manuscript written, erased, and rewritten over centuries. The physics of empire, the brilliant management of weight and thrust, must now contend with the ethics of memory. How do we ensure these monuments speak truthfully to future generations? Their ultimate, enduring value may lie less in the answers we impose and more in the difficult, necessary questions they continue to provoke. The curve of an arch is one of humanity's oldest and most enduring conversations. From the first stacked stones of a Mycenaean tomb to the algorithmic elegance of a digitally printed shell, this journey reveals a constant dialogue between our grandest ambitions and the unyielding laws of physics. Vaults and arches are far more than architectural features. They are the crystallized ambition of empires, the physical manifestation of a profound desire to order the chaos of space, to defy the pull of gravity, and to project a vision of power meant to last for centuries. We have traced a story of relentless material innovation, from the hewn stone of the aqueduct to the pourable mountain of Roman concrete, and onward to the iron lace of the Crystal Palace. This evolution runs parallel to a deepening scientific understanding, a path from the empirical rules of thumb mastered by anonymous masons to the precise graphical analysis of thrust lines, and finally to the complex computational models that design our world today. These silent, enduring structures teach us a powerful lesson that the most formidable and lasting forms of power are not built on myth or fear alone, but on a foundation of fundamental truth. In their case, the truth is written in the language of compression and thrust, of weight and counterbalance. This is a legacy that surrounds us still. The next time you walk through a grand railway station, gaze up at the dome of a civic building, or even pass under a simple brick bridge, see it as part of this grand, ongoing narrative. Notice the curve and consider the centuries of human ingenuity it represents. We would love to hear what you discover. Share in the comments an arch or a vaulted space in your own environment that has ever captured your imagination. Thank you for joining this visual journey through the ancient ambitions carved in